What if you learned that something you've always thought was true was false? How many lies do you still believe? Is Santa Claus a real man? Is nitrogen really the main component of Earth's atmosphere? Did the Titanic really hit an iceberg? We all know the story. On the maiden voyage across the North Atlantic, the Titanic hit an iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on the night of April 14th, 1912. Approximately 2 hours later, the ship sank entirely, taking 1,500-ish people down to a watery grave. This is one of the most infamous disasters in modern human history. But some people refuse to believe that the story of the Titanic is as straightforward as the history books would have us believe. This is their story. The number of theories that exist for the truth behind the Titanic's catastrophe is staggering. At face value, there are two main camps: historical perspectives and supernatural perspectives, both of which provide equally convincing arguments for what really happened.
From the very beginning, the largest controversy surrounding the Titanic is whether or not it is likely, or even feasible, that a ship of that magnitude could be taken down by a simple iceberg.
Absolutely. It's absolutely possible. There are thousands of examples from human history showing the dangers of icebergs to metal-hulled ships under enormous pressure. The Titanic is actually the most famous example I could possibly provide.
But others aren't so easily convinced. Titanic truthers operate under the impression that an iceberg was not, in fact, what sent the famous ocean liner to the bottom of the North Atlantic.
An iceberg sinking the Titanic? No way. Let's not kid ourselves. We know it was an inside job.
The Germans. I can confidently say that the Germans sank the Titanic.
One of the more famous of these is the no iceberg theory, first argued in the controversial case study, But Were There Actually Any Icebergs?, by eminent pseudo-climatologist Remus Portley, published in 1991 in the Kansas Oceanological Journal. We're here at Mr. Portley's home, which has fallen into disrepair since Cheryl left.
All serious students of pseudoclimatology can point out the most glaring inconsistency of the Titanic cover-up story, and that is icebergs weren't even around the North Atlantic that April.
Portley and his colleagues believe that, due to El Niño weather patterns in the fall of 1911, most pack ice in that stretch of water had migrated by late February at the very latest, a month and a half before the Titanic would sail.
The iceberg herds had migrated north in search of better hunting. Serious upwelling around Greenland the likely source, though we can't be certain.
Remus Portley is an anthrohydrologist, meaning he believes that water, and all of its forms, including icebergs, are living entities.
It seems awfully hypocritical that liberals can say things like, Ireland is a real country, and then not believe in anthrohydrology. Makes you want to take a long, cold shower and then drink yourself to death. That answer your question?
Hands-on research can sometimes be better than theoretical conjecture, or the crushing weight of alcohol addiction.
All these sycophantic, neo-educational farces so high up in their ivory fortresses, they haven't even looked at the models. I've looked at the models.
Let's hear from Barnabas Matthews, deep-sea explorer and 3-time world equestrian champion. Well, I've been down to the wreck, see? It was our research vessel up overhead, and then me in a big bronze diving suit, wading through the muck and the mud on the debris on the seabed. There's all sorts of stuff down there. There's forks and mirrors and the material remains of the physical remains of the people whose remains no longer remain. It's truly awe-inspiring. And what did your inspection lead you to believe about the credulity of the commonly held assertion that the Titanic didn't sink? Oh, it definitely sank. I went down to the ship's remains. Right, but let me rephrase. The assertion that the vessel went down for reasons other than iceberg collision. Oh. Well, the metal seemed a bit rusted, eh? So if they use rusted metal to build the ship, how is it going to withstand the iceberg? You really have to wonder about the business model of the people building a ship with flawed materials. It's probably the Irish.
Aye. We're all Irishmen here.
Still, some of the most convincing arguments about the Titanic arise from the turbulent geopolitical climate of the early 20th century. Leading speculation among Titanic truthers is that a German U-boat, relatively new technology in 1912, intentionally torpedoed the Titanic in order to push the British and German empires prematurely into World War I.
We, the people, need to know. Who sank the Titanic? Was it the Germans? Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine a crew of war-hungry, hawkish German sailors lurking off the coast of Newfoundland, and they get this telegraph transmission that a big British ship is coming through. So then,
That technology even exists back
so then, according to German naval protocol of the time, they decide, let's sink that fucker. And they did.
Of course, in order for this theory to gain traction, there would need to be evidence of a torpedo detonation on the hull of the sunken vessel. Scholars and divers disagree on whether the dated metal can accurately reflect the nature of the damage.
The hull of the ship was broken in two, something that Titanic apologists have tried to blame on water pressure or physics. But a large metal ship doesn't just end up at the bottom of the ocean without an outside agent, such as an explosion, causing it. And that is scientific fact. But it wasn't some German torpedo.
Many in the academic community consider Forrest Kane III to be Rachel Jones's arch nemesis, both in terms of Titanic research and sexually.
He's a loose cannon. Don't tell me that you're interviewing him for this too, are you? Forrest? Are you? Oh my God! And if you were to ask him how many continents there are, he would probably say, my asshole.
Is it true that you and Forrest dated from 2004 to 2007?
I have to go. I have a thing. Thank you. This was lovely. But I have to be somewhere that's not here. Thank you. I'm just gonna.
Kane's theory is that agents of the British Empire, anxious to start a war with Germany, decided to sabotage the RMS Titanic to sink in New York City harbor.
But things didn't go according to plan. See, the saboteurs smoked too much marijuana at an event party on board and became paranoid, a common side effect of the THC in the marijuana. So, they became convinced that their plot had been uncovered and that they would be forced to walk the plank, common nautical judiciary practice on ocean liners at the time. So Eric Beetleman, head British agent, decided to blow up the ship 300 miles off the coast of Newfoundland.
As their heads began to clear, the British saboteurs began to seriously regret their actions, but it was too late. The explosives they rigged had already detonated in the buoyancy compartments beneath the ship, and chain reactions, coupled with shoddy workmanship from the insufferable Irish, resulted in a complete fiasco.
The SS Californian gets a lot of grief in the academic community for not answering the call of the flares. But what people don't know is that the Californian was supposed to be a getaway vehicle for the saboteurs. They all knew the plan, see? So when the flares went up, They didn't realize that their allies had prematurely compromised the Titanic.
According to Kane's theory, crew members on the Californian were certainly
By the name of, I want to say Klaus Friedel Bergenkant? Yes, it was Klaus Friedel Bergenkant, who was a German spy turned British agent. And he was supposed to publicly take responsibility for the explosion once it sank in the New York harbor. And in return, the British were going to resettle him in British India and give him a Punjabi villa for him to live out the rest of his days, all expenses paid. But with records being so actively maintained and the limited number of survivors, the British had to quietly inform Klaus that they no longer needed him to spread the fake news. And furthermore, he would no longer be receiving his Punjabi villa anymore.
This guy is the academic equivalent of finding one sock but knowing that there was two. There's something missing with him, and it's like the one sock you find is dirty. It's a dirty sock, and you know that there were two and that they used to be clean with pure knowledge, the pure pursuit of knowledge, which is all that I'm...
Jones remains dismissive down to the time of this production, but according to extant records discovered late last year in a filing cabinet in the burned-out remains of a former municipal building in Midtown, Iowa, there was a historical figure named Klaus Friedel Bergenkant, born in 1892 to a mid-tier German industrialist from Hamburg named Lord Frederick Friedel Bergenkant. But whether or not this is the same man who Kane believes almost got a free Punjabi villa, only time and...
Why are you even interviewing me for this? Obviously, you're not interested in any rational arguments.
Rationality is subjective, as everyone knows. At least some people aren't afraid to expose the hard facts. And for hard facts about the sinking of the Titanic, there's no better source than to get inside the mind of a real-life boat wrangler. Meet Martha Conway Adolphus. She's the captain of a mid-tier cargo ship that regularly travels between ports up and down the North Atlantic seaboard, but with a strong preference to avoid anything south of the Floridian Peninsula.
I know you're probably wondering why I am the captain of a seafaring vessel, but also have a vagina. What a lot of people don't realize is there are a lot of female ship captains. It is a primarily male-dominated industry, but there are some women. I am one of them.
Okay, I don't know if you implied that you weren't a captain.
Oh, you didn't? I just felt the need to clarify. A lot of people, when they think of a ship captain, they imagine a burly man with a neatly trimmed white beard wearing a blue coat. He's got a multi-spoked wooden wheel, and he's sailing into a raging storm. And while my ship does feature a multi-spoked wooden wheel, and I do frequently sail into raging storms, I am not a burly man with a neatly trimmed white beard, and I very rarely wear blue coats.
Okay, well, we're here to ask you a couple questions about the Titanic.
Did you intentionally stun me by refusing to use the honorific captain when introducing me in the previous shot? Because of my vagina?
What?
The previous shot, the B-roll of me looking out over the river, you say, meet Martha Conway Adolphus, when the correct procedure would have been, meet Captain Martha Conway Adolphus. Oh, yes, you did. Edward, play the tape.
Meet Martha Conway Adolphus.
Notice anything wrong with how you handled that? Yeah, I think we are. Huh.
Not all scholars approach the issue of the Titanic with a mind for history. There is strong evidence for the role of mysticism, magic, and even religion in terms of coping with the loss of this great ocean liner.
Now, let's start with just the facts, okay? Starting with just the basics, the Titanic has 7 letters, but April 14th, the alleged date of the sinking, falls into the traditional Gregorian calendar months of Aries. Now, the Titanic was commissioned on September 17th, 6 years prior, but what really matters here is whether we should be looking at a Gregorian calendar at all, because Who invented the zodiac?
The zodiac was a Chinese invention dating back to before the 14th century BCE, following the lunar calendar attributed through divine
No, not the
revelation.
Chinese zodiac! The Babylonian one. One is year-based and the other is... Never mind. The ancient Babylonians used the zodiac to study the night sky and track the rise and fall of the crescent moon. In order to find out what really happened to the Titanic, what really happened, we have to look at the difference between this ancient Babylonian calendar and our current reformed one. April 14th falls into the Babylonian month of Aranisanu, or Araru, depending on whether you lend any credence to Ptolemy of Egypt's ancient text, the Amalgast. We look at the presiding Chaldean deity, Bel, or Belus, which is a common misnomer for the actual deity from ancient Akkad, Marduk the dragon. Now, everyone knows that dragons have the potential to be aquatic creatures, though I see they don't have to be. But do you know where the Titanic was when it supposedly sank? The ocean.
And for most of the contentious factions in the ongoing struggle to find out what really happened to the Titanic, this is one point all can agree on. The Titanic sank in the ocean. Of course, the people who believe there never was a Titanic vessel might argue against this, but even they can see that were it to have existed, the ocean is in fact the most likely place in which it would have sunk.
And, for a little extra mindfuck, ocean has 5 letters in it, which is only 2 less than Titanic. Coincidence? Hardly.
That man just used dragons to prove the Titanic didn't hit an iceberg. I would like to kindly request that I'm not featured in this documentary.
Sir, you already gave your permission.
No, I don't give my permission.
But you signed these waivers.
Well, I'll unsign the waivers. How about that?
As the book of Revelations 4:17 says, "Woe unto the ship of many smokestacks, the harlot of the nations, and of her false prophets in white coats." The James Cameron film from the late 90s, I want to say 97, 98, somewhere in that range, with the Celine Dion song, near, far, wherever you are, my heart will go on. It's a great song. But anyway, why use 2 VHS tapes? Why can't a movie just fit on one single VHS tape? It's bad cinema practice, I'd say. Also, the sex scene, a bit too forced for my liking. I would have preferred a little more build-up. Maybe some role play. You know what I'm saying? It just made it a better movie. The James Cameron film Mr. Matthews referred to actually was released in 1997, 85 whole Earth years after the sinking of the ship. IMDb, or the Internet Movie Database, only gives it a 7.7 out of 10 stars, which may come from an ongoing legal battle surrounding Cameron, the Titanic, and a cult of ancient druids. We will discuss this controversy in our straight-to-VHS companion piece, Cameron's Folly. This has been a brief journey into the annals of history and science to truly investigate what happened to the Titanic. These brave men and women, the noble ones who have refused to be fed the lies of the United States government, they are the true heroes. We wish them luck in all their future research, and we too hope that one day, in the not-so-distant future, the Titanic Delusion will be sunk once and for all.